just like randomly joining this live stream. I'm gonna start trying to do this a little more often, and I thought it would be cool to see if anybody wanted to come and chat. I don't know if anybody's gonna see this at first, so I'm just gonna be talking by myself for a little bit. I'm trying out some new software at the same time, so that's gonna make things a little bit more complicated. Welcome to our live show, I guess is the title, which is a terrible title. Let me see if I can change that while I wait for people to kind of trickle in. I wanted to do this today actually for a very particular reason. I am about like a year out from going full time on YouTube, and so since I'm now just going full time on YouTube, I am able to give people some updates, see how things are going, and also just take some questions. So while I'm trying to change the title for this live stream, maybe I'll tell everybody a little bit about how things are going, and then we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. And who knows, how long we'll do this. So for those of you who don't know, a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, kind of in May of last year, I had just moved, and then I got this news that, like, while I was unpacking my house, that I was laid off from my last tech job. And after I got, oh, okay, yeah, I need to get a little bit louder. Somebody else tell me if the audio is okay. I'm still messing around with this new software, so it's really hard for me to tell myself. Is that a little bit better? Um, okay, I think that's a little bit better. Okay, so anyway, I had just like gotten laid off. I got laid off like again, like while I was unpacking boxes, and I have like a kid, and I'm doing normal stuff like sort of dad stuff while I'm doing this. And so then I kind of made this. I don't know. I had this idea. I was like, why don't I just try and see if I can not get a job, and I can just keep making YouTube videos and write on Substack and everything. And I just got a huge amount of support from all of you, from my audience, and everyone was like, "Yeah, just give it a shot. Let's see if it can work." And my wife told me, it's like, "Okay, you can try that. Let's give it like 3 months. Let's give it like 3 months." And then the first 3 months went pretty well, and it was like, "All right, let's give it like 6 months." And so I decided I would. Okay, I've got someone immediately. I have to, I think, ban. But the question of this, like, let's give it 6 months because everything was working out, and now it's been a year, and things are going pretty well, and so I am, uh, yeah, just here to kind of share that with everybody and to talk. I don't know how to ban people when I am on, when I am doing this through Riverside, but let's see. Now I'm seeing that the audio is too high. Is it too high or is it high or low? Um, I hate this new software, I think. I'm trying it for the first time now, and I'm just like so angry at it already. Um, so, yesterday I just released this video about literacy, and I just talked about literacy rates in the country. And one of the things that made me actually want to make that video again and talk about it again, since it's a topic that I've brought up a couple of times, was the fact that I had stumbled on that website, the National Literacy Institute, and had found that it was putting out kind of like bunk statistics, um, which is always really a bummer because I think literacy is one of these things that we have to continually work at in this country. Like we're doing a terrible job of actually teaching people how to read, and I'm sure people in the comments there telling me that I'm okay. I see. Um, ooh, now I see. The chat like doesn't auto scroll here either. Um, like it seems like around the world we're having like these literacy problems. But then when you see like statistics, like 40% of kids can't read at all or something, turns out it's like completely um, fabricated or it's like a total misinterpretation. Um, Okay, I just got a question here and we'll turn back to the literacy stuff here. But Winston just asked me my top 5 most favorite books of all time. Winston, I made a video a couple of years ago at this point, probably 2 years ago, early on in my YouTube career, where I made my top 10 list of books. And I was just looking through it and seeing if I still believed that some of those were my favorite books. And I'll say I think the top 3 or 4 are still right. Um, Crime and Punishment is my favorite novel. Uh, then The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin's my favorite science fiction novel, and The Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle is my favorite work of philosophy. Those are still there. I don't know if I would say if I how confident I am in the rest of that top 10. And this is sort of the weird thing about making a top 10 list, right? If you make some list of your favorite books, suddenly you're being told like what happened here is like you've like cemented your opinions um like out for everybody. And so like suddenly you have to like stick by it forever. It's why I'm kind of averse to making those lists again. Um but those are I think um roughly still some of my favorites. Um, I do still really like Blood Meridian. I don't know um if it would be in the top 10, but I still really love Blood Meridian. Um, okay, I'm seeing here that someone asked me, would I make videos on Berserk or Vagabond? I don't think you can see it because of the lighting here, but if you look, I have a ton of Berserk volumes behind me, and I am trying to read through them because I do think I could do a philosophy of Berserk video in the future. I don't know when. Unfortunately, I've committed to too many projects currently, and so it's really hard for me to keep up with all of my commitments already. I have this video on Nietzsche that I've mentioned many times that I feel like I have to finally finish it, and I'm making progress there. I have this Lord of the Rings and philosophy video I've been wanting to make forever that I've like half written, and I would have to, go through like so much like rereading for as well. I think Berserk is probably the one I'd be most likely to make out of those two, though. I have read some Vagabond, and I do think it's really good. It does have this problem that it's unfinished, and it seems like it will never be finished. I guess Berserk's not done, right? But uh, I don't know. I don't know. It feels a little bit weird to make the video about it, because of like the weird place it is with its creator. Um, someone asked here, oh, okay. Um, who do you think is the most overrated philosopher? Okay. Yeah, do you guys remember when I made like a tier list about philosopher? Everyone hated all of my opinions, so I don't know. Um, so I don't know what to say about that. Um, let's see. I've been struggling through the Nicomachean Ethics. Am I just stupid? I don't think that you um are stupid. I think that it's hard. I wrote a series of articles about the Nicomachean Ethics in my Substack. That's jaredhenderson.substack.com. You could just read through those, and that might help you a little bit. Um, yeah. Um, ooh, what do I think of? I assume here AOT is um, Attack on Titan. Yeah, I love Attack on Titan. I think Attack on Titan's great. I have no idea what to make of the ending, sort of philosophically and things like how do you interpret the whole series? I don't know, but I remember I read Attack on Titans and probably in like the span of like a week. So I really liked Attack on Titan. So I think that one's certainly worth reading. It could be something to talk about, but I don't know when I would talk about it. Um, I've never read Butcher's Crossing. I see someone here mentioning that I should do this if I'm also doing this. Have I ever read any Polish literature? I don't think I have. If someone um, had recommendations for Polish literature, I would be open to it. I am trying to read more literature in translation this year. In fact, I've read quite a bit of literature translation so far. Um, in fact, why don't we, as we people are kind of you know, here, do I like Death Note? I've never read or watched Death Note. Is the Tolkien video still planned? Nice, I can actually put these on the screen. It is still planned. The problem is I decided that I was going to reread like everything that I've read of Tolkien before. I'm not going to read like all of the miscellaneous writing. But I just like I bit off more than I could chew there, right? So it's just one of these problems where if I'm going to do all of these projects that I keep saying I'm going to do, I need to focus on one or two of them. Right now, that's the Nietzsche video. Um, and then who knows? Um, have I read Simone Weil? I have. I really like the book The Need for Roots. It also has maybe like the funniest cover of a book I've ever seen. If you see like the classics edition of The Need for Roots, because it's literally root vegetables. It's like carrots are on the cover, which is a very silly cover, but um, I like The Need for Roots quite a bit. Um, I am thinking about eventually a video about existentialism, and probably Simone Weil would be a big part of that video for me because of the existentialists that I like, she is one of my favorite. She's one of my favorites, certainly. Yeah, I like the stream, folks. Um, ooh, okay. Have I read more from China Mieville? I have now read Perdido Street Station. Um, the one that's set in Paris with like the art that comes alive. I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head, and I've read The City and City. So I've read three things from China Mieville. Probably would want to read more. It's just a matter of when I'm gonna have time. Um, ooh, okay. Here is an interesting question. What are your thoughts on the current Harvard situation? Yeah, I think that pretty much Harvard's doing the right thing, standing up. I think all of the stuff about like revoking student visas or not allowing international students to enroll or something like this is egregious, and I'm glad that they are actually, fighting back legally. Um, do I speak any other languages? I have always been a really terrible student of languages. I kind of had this mission to get better at German so I could finally do more reading in it. And I'm thinking about doing it in a slightly old school way where you read like a German grammar and learn a lot of vocabulary rather than caring too much about conversation. Obviously, it'd be nice to converse more in a foreign language. However, I think that I'm more interested in just seeing can I read those books in the first place. Um, I wish I could. Uh, I wish I could see. Actually, it had a way to like save things here, early on, but I. Okay. Why is Crime and Punishment so popular? Just don't get it. Well, okay, so I think that the reason well, I can't tell you, I can't answer the question of why is Crime and Punishment so popular because I have no idea what other people think about things. Um, I can, on the other hand, though, tell you why I like Crime and Punishment so much. Crime and Punishment is a novel about anxiety. Obviously, we live in a very anxious age. Because we live in such an anxious age, people want to, figure out some way to process that anxiety. Crime and Punishment is also as a novel about the possibility of redemption. Have you ever done something so wrong or so evil, and you feel like you can never come back from it? Crime and Punishment basically is the novel that tries to work through some of this. It also, I think, it just has like a terrific ending. If you're able to get through it, you will you'll benefit quite a bit from it. Because of you, I am now into philosophy, so just wanted to say thank you. I want to try and thank you very much for that. That means a lot to me. I think I am thinking about like sort of um like why I do what I do, and that is the sort of thing that I think is like the best comment to hear. So thank you very much for saying that. Um, have you checked out Michael Suguru's channel on here who does philosophy? Yeah, yeah. Michael Suguru is amazing, and I mean his work is amazing, and I'm glad it's on YouTube. Um, I think his sort of his version of introducing people to philosophy, I mean, it got like no recognition for years. A lot of I think those old videos, whenever they were being broadcast, they weren't that popular. But then they found an audience on YouTube. I think especially during the pandemic, which was amazing for him. And I was glad also that he lived long enough that he got to see that, so he got to see the difference that he was making in people's lives. Um, what are so ooh what are some books that you have read that you didn't think of then as you've oh, okay, that question at first, like what are books that I've read that I didn't think much of? That was a good question, and then you asked like, oh, what are the ones that are like um that have later on you've come to appreciate more? Well, I certainly didn't appreciate Nietzsche as much as I did until about a year ago, and I started reading Nietzsche when I was about 19, so it took me quite a while to actually see anything of value in Nietzsche. And maybe that'll come out a little bit in the Nietzsche video I'm working on. So I hope that was, um, oh yes. So someone here is saying that I studied at UConn, which has a strong logic program, and I also had a publication with J.C. Beale. Yeah, J.C. Beale, who's now at Notre Dame, he's no longer at UConn. He and I are co-authors on a paper in kind of logic adjacent topics. And I did a lot of philosophy of language and logic for my dissertation. That was actually what I studied. I didn't do any. I haven't done any sort of history of philosophy stuff really when I was in graduate school. That is something. What philosopher would you recommend to start when you're trying to learn about Western philosophy? The answer to that is Plato. You should just go get the complete works of Plato if you possibly can, or just pick up the 5 dialogues that I've recommended over and over again. Just grab those and see where it takes you and see which topics interest you. They are going to be the ways I think to kind of immerse yourself at first. This. I've been reading Montaigne's essays. What do you think about them? You know, I was just reading Montaigne's essays like yesterday. I mean, I never just like read the book all the way through, right? But I was reading of books because I'm writing a book right now. I have a publisher. I have a deadline for my manuscript in February. I'm writing a chapter about reading, and it seemed like really fitting to incorporate Montaigne there in of books. I generally like them. I do think they are often a little meandering, and Montaigne himself says like these are sometimes kind of pointless. I don't know what I'm arguing for, which is fine. And I think they are generally very pleasant to read, and sometimes very insightful. And I also like to usually follow up on Montaigne's references, so that's something always worth doing. Um, Philosophical advice on how to cope with working a job you hate. You know, I really feel this, man. Mona, I have worked several jobs that I really hated, and the truth is actually I don't have great advice for how to cope with it. I want to tell you though that it does really suck. It is really awful. A lot of people are like, "Oh, all jobs are bad, so like none of them are really bad or something." That's really spurious. No, it really sucks to work a job that you hate. Um, and if you can find anything meaningful to do outside of your work, that's the only way to really cope with it. But I have I have no idea what you do exactly. Um, see, have I read the Quran? I've not read the Quran. Um, Thoughts on Stephen King? I have only read the Dark Tower books because they were sort of big fantasy series that I wanted to read at some point. And I like some of them. I think all of the Dark Tower books from King that I like are the ones that people like the least in that series. Like Wolves of the Kala, Wizard and Glass, and The Gunslinger. I like all the Western stuff, but I've never read any of his other stuff. Um, hmm, let's see. How can you define philosophy on your own definition, and how is it significant in today's world? Well, I think of philosophy as um, a particular kind of mode of inquiry, a type of like way of asking questions that's typically non-empirical, so we don't rely on simply like the results of the sciences, and ask questions which we have to be open to the idea that they themselves are not well formulated. By that I mean we might eventually discover that we're asking a bad question, and that discovery alone counts as philosophical progress. So that is roughly how I think about uh, philosophy, and it's worth asking because it's worth learning how to ask better questions. Um, let's see. I enjoy the for Stephen King. I read the first two, finding it underwhelming. I don't hate him, but when it comes to Stephen King, he's not someone I'm particularly interested in going reading more from. I think I saw someone asking, but I lost though about naming a necessity from Kripke. I have, but it's been years since I was in graduate school. But I read naming a necessity twice when I was in graduate school. Um, so so is meaning discovered or does our longing invent it? I have been thinking about that a lot because in relation to the Nietzsche video, and I do tend to think that meaning is something that we construct rather than discover. I don't know if it's the longing that invents it or like the fact that we really want it that supplies it, but meaning is something that we have to sort of make um, under whatever definition of meaning you mean. This is one of the difficulties of asking that question is like, what do people mean when they say about meaning? Like, what does meaning mean? I really don't know. Um, Ooh, have I read Borges? Favorite work of his? I've just said Ficciones. Um, it's that's probably the obvious one here. I particularly like the what's the title of the story where they're describing the world where idealism is true. That's probably my favorite story. The Library of Babel is great though. I've been doing this thing where I've been copying out by hand the first pages of a the first pages of stories or books that I really like, and I chose a Borges stories as one of the first things to do, and I copied out the first page of the Library of Babel. So, um, do you think it's useful for kids to use tech? As a teacher, I see literacy taking such a nosedive. Spelling test and ban as seen is too compelling. You know, I can tell you that here's what I do for my own family. That's probably the best way to describe it. I have a 2-year old, and we let him use tech in very limited ways. Like he has a puzzle game he really likes, and we're okay with that. He is also able to use it to control music because he can cycle through a playlist, and I think those are the right things to do. Um, I don't like to let him use technology too much. I do see him get really cranky really quickly. I see kids becoming dependent on technology very quickly. And so I'm trying to um, give him sort of a healthy relationship with technology, but that usually means limits. So Jack says Borges is the only Latin American novelist I like so far. You should read Roberto Bolaño and see if maybe you like him too. Yeah. By I saw Michael Burns in here, guy from Wisecrack, got his own channel. And Michael, if you're still in here, just know that I saw you and I want to say hi. And I look forward to seeing your next video too. I just saw you put out a video about postmodernism, and you say everyone is wrong about postmodernism. I don't know if I'm right about postmodernism, so I have to watch this and maybe I can find out. Yeah. Um, I have not read any Deleuze. So for those who are asking, I have not read any Deleuze. So Pratik just started an introduction to Western philosophy by Thames and Hudson. Is it a good enough starting point for a deep dive? I don't know that particular um, that particular book. What I could say here is I don't love those kinds of big introductions as your first exposure to any kind of philosophy. If you're finding it helpful enough, don't stop now. But what I want to be able to do first is actually just read the philosophers that they are reading about. Um, I would just say like just read Plato first, and that would be the first thing I would do. And then you can see here. Um, do I like Andor? I have not watched Andor. I've heard really good things, but I don't have a subscription to Disney Plus. Don't really have any interest in getting another subscription. So can't say. Familiar with Wittgenstein? I know you're familiar with Wittgenstein. Have you come across the new Wittgensteinians like Rupert Reed and Cora Diamond? I have come across them a little bit, but it's been so long that I couldn't really say anything like this. I think I read something about Cora Diamond on Wittgenstein and riddles that I really enjoyed, but again, that's been so long. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Um, how strong of a mathematics background is needed to do doctoral work in logic? Well, let me tell you a story. I was not a particularly great math student. And for that reason, I could not do strict logic only, right? I could do more philosophical logic. But I found that it was a skill that I could develop. If you can understand set theory and algebra, then you can do quite a bit of formal logic. And it's just a matter of applying yourself. Um, Jack wants to know which Bolaño should read first. I would say that you should read, is it By Night in Chile? That was the one I was just reading, actually. and it's terrific, and it's like 90 pages. So yeah. Um, what was the theme of my PhD dissertation? My dissertation was on theories of truth in the philosophy of language and the natural language semantics of the truth predicate. Um, I defended a view that said that truth is a matter of degrees, that things can be more true or less true, and I tried to base that on linguistic evidence and then develop a theory of truth that fit that linguistic evidence. So you can see I used to be much more of an analytic philosopher than I am these days. Um, so what was my first philosophy experience? You know, I I can remember the first time I had what I consider to be like a real philosophical thought, which was when I was very young, and it's kind of dark. Sorry, folks. I was in the back seat of my mom's van. We were driving home from like a fair, and I was maybe 6 or 7, and I announced that I was afraid of dying because for the first time I had comprehended death, like that things end. And it turns out a lot of philosophers get their start by thinking about death or something. So that was probably the first one. The one that made me angry the first time, which was kind of a helpful emotion for a little while, was probably actually something to do with about mathematical definitions, and I wanted to know like what made them true. That was the question that kind of got me started for a while. Where should I start learning Eastern philosophy? It's really confusing. That's not an area of expertise for me or even competence. You could just try and read Confucius, read the Tao Te Ching, read Zhuangzi. There's this great little volume called Four Chinese Classics, where you can get four like classic works of Chinese philosophy. I think the fourth one would be Mencius, and just read there and read the notes and see if you like it. But um, maybe that would be helpful enough. How do you keep your attention span? Do you lock away your phone? So I even use this little device called a brick, and it sounds kind of so silly, but it's this little thing that you can scan on your phone, and it disables like all of your apps if you tell it to, except for some very minimum ones. Because like if my I keep my phone with me in case my wife needs me, like for our kid. Like that's the main reason that I hold on to it. I can disable almost everything else though. The trick I think is that my willpower is very low. I don't really um, have like any interest in expending all of my willpower to fight off those distractions. So I just try to delete the possibility of those, very early on. Um, ooh, I have not read any books by Dallas Willard. Um, I had a master's reader, like a secondary examiner, who worked on phenomenology. Whose doctoral dissertation was Dallas Willard, actually. But um, have I worked on adaptive logics? Ooh, I don't. Can if you could say a little bit more of what you mean by adaptive logic, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever worked on those or even thought about those. At UConn, we did like a lot of non-classical logics though, but mostly like relevant logics, and then things like FD, LP, K3. And then of course I had to do like degree logics for my dissertation work. I don't know which philosopher I would say best reflects all of my beliefs. Obviously, Aristotle's a huge influence on me. Um, Hannah Arendt increasingly is someone I turn to quite a bit. As I'm writing my book, I'm relying a lot on Arendt. I've found that her insights are really helpful for me. So that's someone. So I guess you could say I've become much more. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. That's a really good question though. Because I don't know. Have I ever read Mythology by Edith Hamilton? I see it on prep list. Um, I have it on my shelf. Actually, I got it a while back because I thought one day I'm going to want to read this to my son, but I've never read it cover to cover or anything. I've just flipped through it and read certain things. Um, what were your opinions on AOT's ending? Really hard to make sense of most of it. I do like the bit at the very end with like the tree. I'll say that in case other people haven't watched this. I like that very last thing. Um, Top bioethics authors. I don't know if I've read like any bioethics in so long that I wouldn't even know who's doing interesting work in bioethics these days. So yeah, I don't know. At some point, you would have to you read Peter Singer or something. I don't even know if he's actually that influential in bioethics anymore either. Uh, it's fine. Yeah. Bradley is reading The Dispossessed on my recommendation and really enjoying it. I'm glad. I really love the Dispossessed, as many people here know, and so um, I'm glad when I find other people. I have read Dune. I have read Dune multiple times. I have seen the movie, including I've seen the David Lynch film and then the two Villeneuve films as well. I like them all, man. Um, what are your thoughts on anarchism? I don't call myself an anarchist, okay? But Le Guin has made me incredibly sympathetic to it. Let's put it that way. Um, I would need to, I would need to think through my political beliefs in substantial more detail to answer that. Um, but The Dispossessed was really formative for me, and it kind of would make it hard for me to at least dismiss anarchism completely. How do you deal with burnout as a university student? Um, no. How do you deal with burnout as a university student? The question so here is my hand waving theory of what burnout is. That burnout is coming from a sense like where we are forced to do something and we don't think there's any point to it. And on top of that, we have to feign positivity about it. And I think that there's three components to burnout, sort of being forced to do something over and over again. You'd feel like it's pointless, and you feel like there's an expectation that you have to pretend that it's okay. And I would just say, are any of those true when it comes to you as a university student? And thinking through which of those is true is probably going to point you in the solution, in the direction of a solution. I don't like to give people too much like psychological advice though, because it's just not my area. Um, so thoughts on piracy of books? Okay, so this is a really good question because I am writing a book. Obviously, I want people to buy my book. Um, I tend to think that piracy is an access problem. That typically when people are pirating, it's because they can't afford the books. That's not always true, but it's often true. And it's because they're not actually making PDFs or digital copies readily available or letting you actually own the books that you buy. I've made several videos about this at this point, that so many of these books that we are buying via Kindle or something, you don't really own. Tor is an exception. There's no DRM on those Kindle files because Tor insists on it. Um, so why do people pirate? They typically pirate because they actually want to have copies, or it's too hard for them to get copies that they would pay for. When you find these academic books that are $75 a copy and you're not even sure if it's worth it, I can't blame people, even though as an author, like I need people to buy my book so I can make a living, right? So I am conflicted about this, but I don't typically place a lot of blame on individuals here. Um, do you think it's possible to make a living out of publishing either novels or philosophy books? It is possible. It's hard, and it depends on what you mean by like making a living. Is it possible to make enough that you could pay your basic bills if you didn't live in an expensive city? I do think that's possible. It's hard and it would take a lot of work, but if it's what you really wanted to do, it certainly is possible. I don't think it's easy to say live a comfortable middle class life um, doing that unless you get really lucky. But you could, and I think going for it and striving for it is good. And many of the best writers that I know work other jobs too. So they do that so that they can get around to writing. I hate that it's like that, but that's just like the truth of what the writing business is like right now. It's like that for all forms of writing, even. Um, Someone asked me here, uh, do I believe in free will? Uh, I think I'm a compatibilist, but I don't have like great answers, like great or arguments for that view. I'll admit here, I'm just kind of going on vibes. Uh, what advice would you give to an incoming philosophy major? And do you think philosophy pairs best with history or politics? It would pair well with either of those. I think history is probably a better major, just for my own preferences. What I would say for someone who's coming into uh, philosophy and trying to make sense of it for the first time, actually read the stuff, like read it multiple times, do the readings as many times as you can, and you know, just actually like give a damn. Basically, that's going to put you ahead of many of your peers. Go to office hours if you have the opportunity to talk to your professors, um, and that will show them that you actually care. And I'll say, as a professor, um, I liked students who came to office hours quite a bit because and I was often willing to give them a lot of grace when it came to um, explaining things more and more because I could see that they actually cared. And that was very different than a student who maybe never showed up to class and then at the end of the semester came up to me and said, "Hey, can we do something about my grade?" Um, yeah. Dill course, are you still trying to make videos on your second channel or something that's put on the back burner for now because you really like those vids? Uh, Back burner completely. I just literally don't have time. I think in the future I'd like to do some more streams here, and it's just way easier to do it all in one place. And especially I would like to have people on and maybe talk to them, like my buddy Michael who does that, and just talk about philosophy stuff or talk about some books. So, uh, doing it on two channels I think was a mistake, and I think I'll just do this here. I'm not a writer, but I somehow want to incorporate writing in my life to articulate my thoughts in a better way. Any advice how? The best writers are the best readers. Um, Maybe that's not strictly true, but it's pretty close to being true. And I would just say that if you are trying to articulate better, if you want to become a better speaker, you want to become a clearer thinker, you should just read a lot more than you are. I don't know how much you read, but the answer is probably you should read more than how you're reading. How do you best simulate and obtain a philosophical liberal education with a STEM related degree? I think in that case, you got to do a lot of work on your own. I have talked about this organization called the Katherine Project on camera before, and I've also written about them in my newsletter. They offer free reading groups for people. And there are, I don't know where you are, Veritas, like where you're located. You don't have to tell me, but it's easiest if you're in the United States. But I've been in reading groups with people across the world through the Catherine Project. I'm doing another one, and I just join as a regular participant. I don't lead them or teach them. I'm not involved in any way with like leadership in the Catherine Project. I just do it because it's a way to read classic books together. And they have a thing called the Life of the Mind seminar. If that interests you at all, try to apply to that. Maybe it'd be like 20 or 30 pages of reading a week, but it would introduce you to a lot of great works and kind of simulate having that liberal arts education that you feel like maybe you're missing out on. Sarvish, I don't listen to a lot of philosophy podcasts. I read a lot of philosophy books. I think about philosophy. I watch a few philosophy YouTubers, but I don't do a ton of. I don't listen to a lot of philosophy. I don't listen to many podcasts anymore either. So that's part of the problem. Um, do I play any kind of video games? Very rarely. But the last game I played and enjoyed was Balatro. So I don't know if people like that game here. Um, but I find that it really really is kind of easy for me to get sucked in and become obsessed. So yeah. Should a beginner get a foundation in classical philosophy before going into later areas of thought like existentialism? It's one way to do it, but I would say it's not necessary. I have this belief that um, um, the question where to start is the wrong question usually. You should just start wherever you feel like starting. If you're interested in existentialism, just go and read The Existentialist. If you then find, oh, there's something I don't understand because I need to go back and read something, then you can then stop and go read that. You don't have to like start at the very beginning of philosophy and work your way up. Like imagine if you wanted to read Hegel one day, right? Well, you say, okay, well to read Hegel I have to read Kant. And you read Kant, and Kant tells you that in order to understand him, then you need to go and read Hume. But to understand Hume, you probably actually need to know some scholastic philosophers, and some of those aren't even translated. You got to read some like Suarez or something, and so suddenly you're just going further back and back and back and back, and you'll never actually read Hegel. So whatever it is that you think you want to read, we'll just start there. If you need to find a secondary work to help out, go for it. But um, like just start with the things that you like starting with. Don't start with something that you feel like you have to start with or that you ought to start with. That is almost always kind of BS. I had to uninstall Balatro. Yeah, me too. Um, I had to do that as well. Yes, because Balatro sucked more time out of me. Exactly. I love deck builders. I was a huge Slay the Spire fan at one point, and so it scratches some itches for me that I had to had to eventually just go. I'm not gonna have this anymore. I have not finished the Baroque cycle, Tristan, but I love Neil Stevenson. But yeah. Um, okay, let's see. I hate to spam this way because I've tried plenty to write for myself. It's been insanely hard to get people to read your stuff, even the closest one. Yeah, class, I was writing for years before anyone cared at all about anything I had to say, and it's really hard. So just like if you think you have something to say, keep working on it. You also just never know when you're going to write something that is going to uh finally pop off. So just good luck. I know it's hard. It's a struggle. Um, so typically red, but I don't play Magic the Gathering nearly at all anymore. I basically completely stopped. Yeah. As you can see, if I like deck builders and things, it's going to be a kind of an obsession thing for me. Northern Lion Watcher, on occasion, I do think of streamers, he is my favorite one. Um, how do you break the ice between the tutor and student and officers before the onset? Um, so here is how I have broken the ice with other academics before. And I would just say that you want to ask them what they're working on now or what they are excited about rather than something they've already worked on. And that'll usually get them talking. And that might even help you pick a good master's thesis. Um, so I feel kind of, Noah says he feels kind of lost in life. Is there any book you'd recommend to me? I'm mid 20s. It really depends on what you're feeling, you know, I don't know. Like what the source of feeling lost is. This is going to sound like a weird one. Um, but I think Catch 22 is actually a really helpful novel to read. Um, I would also say there's this book called The Affirmation of Life. It's a secondary work of philosophy about Nietzsche, but I found it incredibly helpful. The Affirmation of Life by Bernard Regenster. In fact, for the Nietzsche video that I'm working on, that might be help. Someone else recommended Kafka on the Shore. That might actually be a good recommendation too. Lots of novels kind of explore this. Catcher in the Rye explores this, and I think it's become cool to like hate the Catcher in the Rye. I can't really tell, but I still love it. So how should one deal with regret? Um, Depends on the source, the origins of your regret. One, read Crime and Punishment. Uh, and two, I do think that there is some wisdom um, in uh, focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't. I do think the Stoics are right about that. It might not be the entirety of what practical philosophy should be like, as some people like to say it, but you should you should mostly focus on what you can control. It's just good. It's just good advice. Are there any other YouTubers worth watching regarding philosophy? I like both Alex O'Connor and Unsolicited Advice. Maybe that's I don't know. When reading dense texts like Kierkegaard or Nietzsche, what strategies do you use to avoid getting lost? Read slowly, read actively with a pencil in your hand. I have some videos about taking notes that have helped. Um, from almost a year ago is the last time I made one, and I probably won't make more because I've said all I need to say about that. But just go as slowly as you need to. Yeah. So, favorite book by Hannah Arendt? The Life of the Mind is my favorite book by Hannah Arendt. I read it as research for my book project, and it was incredibly helpful. I think it's her best work. It's her final work, and I don't think she quite finished it. I think it's supposed to have like a third. installment. But yeah. What's your favorite manga? Oh man, I don't know what my favorite is. I don't read that many, right? So my story with manga is that I was reading a lot of manga when I was younger. Um, when there was like the US version of Shonen Jump magazine that you would get like delivered to your house, and I was reading those. I loved Naruto at one point. I loved One Piece early on. Then I stopped reading, and then I like have recently started rereading, but it's very slow. I do really like Attack on Titan, so but I don't know if it's my favorite. Any self-help books you recommend or rate highly? There are some good ones. But they're rare. Oliver Berkman's 4,000 Weeks is pretty good, called Time Management for Mortals, and it's mostly about the fact that you're going to die, and as you become comfortable with the fact that you're going to die, uh, you know. So. Do I recommend going through the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy before reading a text? I would say try reading the text on your own first. If you need help, then go read the Stanford Encyclopedia article. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Oh, someone asked here, what Discord? Yeah, I have a Discord server, guys. It's just you have to go on my profile on my channel, I think, to find it. I forget to link it in videos all the time, but you know. How's the Proust reading coming? Really slow, but I hope to pick it up in the fall. Getting the book deal changed a lot of my reading plans because I ended up having to focus way more time on writing. How do you decide what's a good translation or an edition? Um, it turns out nowadays most translations that are published are good if they're coming from presses that you think are reputable. Um, yeah. So it's not as hard of a question um, these days. When I was a professor, what were the qualities of successful students? Um, I would say that the most successful students were the ones who actually read, the ones who actually asked questions, and probably actually it was asking questions was the biggest deal. Book deal, yes, Thrani. I'm writing a book, and I made a little post about it on my community tab. No one sees that, and I'm giving updates on my newsletter. Um, and the book is called The Philosophical Life, and it's sort of the autodidact's guide to living the life of the mind, starting with the philosophy of what the life of the mind is. It's incorporating some of the stuff I've done about reading and about note taking in the book, but it's all part of this broader thing about what does it mean to live in the life of the mind in a world that doesn't want you to think, that wants you to be distracted. Yeah. So I hope people will like it. You know, I was talking to Jake from Man Caring Thing just today about something. So maybe at some point. I like him a lot. He and I are friends. I saw someone here. I lost a couple of really good questions. Am I a Fish fan? I'm more of a Grateful Dead guy. Um, just want to say that you and Unsolicited Advice got me into reading philosophy. Really interested in reading The German Idealist. Yeah. I like Joe from Unsolicited Advice a lot. Um, I think he's a really good guy. Fantastic. I don't know what you mean about pipelines here, or my content is an on ramp or a pipeline here. Um, so you'd have to ask me a little bit more. And then maybe I can answer that question. Have I ever thought about my own mortality? I think about my own mortality a lot. And I said earlier that was my first big philosophical question, was like thinking about my own mortality. So I am a coffee guy. What have you changed about recently? Well, if we're counting recently, meaning the last like couple of years, it would be about the value of Nietzsche's work. That's why I've been working on the Nietzsche video for so long. And in fact, I went in thinking that Nietzsche was kind of worthless, and I now have come in really admiring Nietzsche. So, but if you mean, uh, I don't know, the last month, not totally sure. Uh, what is your note-taking tool of choice? My note-taking tool of choice is a pencil and a piece of paper and note cards. Um, So I think that is I think that's the best way to do it, because I think writing things by hand actually helps you retain information and also start processing those thoughts for yourself. I don't think uh, um, I don't think like copying pasting into a note taking app or something is nearly as helpful. I don't know how similar you would say Catch in the Rye is, but I did recommend Catch 22 in the same breath as Catch in the Rye, and I read them pretty close in my high school career, and I link those two books really closely in my head. So I don't know. Um, have you ever looked into anything other than Western philosophy? Like a little bit. I read some Chinese philosophy. I am doing something about Shuangzi on my newsletter later on in the year because I run these read-alongs on my newsletter. It's like weekly stuff. I've been doing Plato's Republic lately with people, and then we're gonna do Remains of the Day as like a little break, do a little novel, and then you're going to go on to then we're gonna go on to Shuangzi. So doing some Taoism, so a little bit. Someone asked, oh man, it keeps going too fast here, about favorite Nietzsche book that isn't Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's definitely The Gay Science. It's one I like reading the most. But Beyond Good and Evil and The Genealogy of Morals. The Nietzsche video is primarily going to be about those four books. Um, there will be citations from other things, but for instance, the video is almost entirely not about the birth of tragedy, and a little bit about the will to power, but not nearly as much. So, the greatest analytical philosophy book to start with. I mean, I think Naming Necessity might be up there. You could read Foundations of Arithmetic by Gottlob Frege. That's actually considered pretty reasonable. Um, Pretty readable actually, despite its age. Nietzsche, sorry, is a um, uh, not a nihilist. Yeah, he's actually trying to offer a solution. That's part of the video that I'm working on. So hopefully, that will be made clear here. No, PGA. This will come out a little bit more when I do something with Alex in the future. There will be something in the future, and we'll talk a little bit about this. I do not call myself an agnostic, though. Okay, I see, Samtastic, you're asking about the pipelines here. I think the stuff that I'm doing, if you're asking about am I a pipeline to anything, I can see what my audience watches. My audience mostly watches book content and some philosophers. Um, and I think that's where they get diverted if they start watching me. And I feel pretty good about that. So, True and Random Gamer, I think this is a little bit wrong, but in an interesting way. He wants us to transcend nihilism and morality. I do think he wants us to transcend nihilism. I don't think he's totally transcending morality. I think that's um, but it's really technical and weird why, and that's going to come out in the video a little bit. So I hope, yeah, you'll see why I disagree. Hopefully in that video. How do you balance a life of the mind with getting out in the world and touching grass, so to speak? This is actually part of the book too. This is gonna be a whole chapter. And so I'd say it's a good question, dude. I think some amount of it is just like you should ask yourself some basic questions like, have I not looked at the screen or like a page for something today? And did you go for a walk? I try to go for walks like every day, and that alone is, I think, a huge, benefit. And then you also have to like, are you making friends? That's part of a good life too. Yeah. What's the best way to study? So the best way to study is, assuming you're talking about books or something, this isn't going to be like studying for a chemistry exam. You are going to go slowly and take thorough notes and use the note card method that I mentioned in a video before. I think that's probably the most helpful way. It's the thing that worked for me. That's why I talk about it. I haven't watched any movies in a long time. I have yeah, I can't even remember the last movie I've seen. Uh, Maybe Dune. It's been a really long time. I just was watching Righteous Gemstones on HBO Max, but that's a TV show. Have I thought about a studying period in Europe? Um, I'd love to, but nowadays, I've got a kid, I've got a wife, I've got a house. I'm kind of locked into where I am. So I have to try to collaborate with people, but long distance wise. Who do you think is the most notable 21st century philosopher is? I think that the easy answer to that might be Byung-Chul Han, um, just because he keeps writing about things that people care about. Um, and this might be related to this question of, um, do you have a favorite living philosopher? And there's lots of living philosophers that I like, actually. Um, and Byung-Chul Han, though, is one of them. And I just go back to a lot of his work. Um, I think someone in my Discord like meant it as a joke. They were like, "You're like a warmed over Byung-Chul Han sometimes." I'm like, I think that that is basically um that's basically what I'm aspiring to be here on YouTube. My favorite contemporary political I don't know if I have a favorite contemporary political philosopher. I don't read that much political philosophy. Uh, what are the skills that an individual will read regardless of career or field? Well, I don't know about skills that are going to help you in your career or whatever, but I can tell you that it's probably useful to learn how to read and to be really good about it. Um, and so, I mean, to learn to like read carefully and critically. You know what, like the one thing that helped me the most when I worked in corporate environments, though, and you'd think this is so small, you should actually prepare for meetings. If you are going to go into a meeting with someone, take 5 minutes to prep for it. And it turns out this is not just good for corporate environments. This is good for like anything that you do when you're meeting with people. Is like take 5 minutes and just write um, out what you want to accomplish and some of the thoughts that you've had, because people are going to tell that you cared, and that's actually surprisingly helpful. I've never heard of psychopaths, so yeah. Yes, the philosopher I was talking about here was Byung-Chul Han. Um, and why was your comment deleted? Well, I don't know. I'm using like a third party thing for this, and I can't even moderate things myself. But the yes, the philosopher I was mentioning before was Byung-Chul Han. There's a hyphen between Byung and Chul, but Hat Jared comes out on days when I haven't combed my hair. So, um, well, Aristotle's Politics is very good, and I'm also reading that on my newsletter soon. But I am not. I was asked about like contemporary political philosophy, so yeah. Um, the How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. I don't think you need a whole another full book like that when you're learning how to read a book. I am going to have a chapter in my book that's sort of about that stuff, but it's much more like stripped down and just giving you what I think are the core of the bits of that advice. So, um, yeah, this live will be available later. Cody, you'd have to say a little bit more about what you mean by deconstruction. Um, okay. Are comics literature? I do think comics can be literature. You know what? I'm going to tell you a little bit about my favorite YouTuber right now. A guy named Matt with 4 T's. Um, Matt is like he makes fantastic content about comics. I'm actually gonna see if I can just put it in the chat. It's like this. Um, and he makes this really compelling case for like the artistic side of it while also talking about the biographies of the creators of those comics. And he can show like how some of them are using really interesting storytelling techniques. And so I would say comics can be literature. That does not mean all comics are good, right? But there are some that are great. Matt is the creator who I think brings that out the most for me. And what does Byung-Chul Han's uh, work dive into? Well, he wrote a book on burnout that I did a video about a little bit on so on my video about burnout about dealing with non-things and like the digital world. He's like a philosopher who cares about things like the digital world. When I said I was trying to like be like Byung-Chul Han, it's because when I talk about philosophy on YouTube, one of the things I'm trying to do is address sort of common concerns that people on the internet have. And I think that's one of the things that Byung-Chul Han does really, really well. So, Jared, what will the essence of your book be, and do you think there's significant with any treatise the relationship between truth and with your treatise? I don't know details about your treatise, so I can't say. My book is about the life of the mind. That's the easiest way to talk about it. I will be able to um, talk more about it later on when it's a little more complete, and I have things from my publisher. Um, okay, I'm a fan of K. Yes, I'm a fan of Wolf. I haven't read M. John Harrison, but I do really like China Mieville. Yeah. Yeah. And Mervyn Peake, is that the Gorgonmest guy? Gorgonmest or something like that? I haven't read it, unfortunately. So, sorry, but you're asking about Chomsky. I know a little bit of his politics work, Manufacturing Consent. I've read that, but his linguistics work is really foundational for people who do semantics and things, and that kind of overlapped with the stuff I was doing in graduate school. Even though Chomsky himself is a kind of skeptic about semantics, he thinks it's kind of syntax all the way down. But yeah. Do I think Islamic philosophers are underrated in the West? I think underrated is a weird term, but since the West is not primarily Muslim, there's less interest. I think that's probably the explanation here. In scholarly circles, you do see more of it. Like the Stanford Encyclopedia recently updated their medieval philosophy entry to include things about Islamic philosophy, which was the right call because it's about the period, not just about one trend within it. Bark and Carl, my cats are doing very, very well. Yeah. The difference between a philosopher and a pizza is that a pizza can actually feed a family. That's weird, man, because I have never failed to feed my family. So, I don't know. Seems like the joke rests on a false premise. Um, I have not read Thomas Pynchon, so I'm embarrassed by that fact, but I should read Thomas Pynchon here. Let me go through here and see advice for a high school English teacher to help students care. The thing that I saw the most that made me care in high school was if my teachers cared. Um, I didn't actually care that much if they were trying to be relatable, right? I didn't care that much if they were trying to like speak my language or whatever. I did care if like they seemed to be interested in the subject rather than going through the motions. I know it can be hard though. My mom's a teacher, and I know that a lot of the stuff that she has to do on a regular basis is basically checking boxes for administrators or for regulations or something, and that is difficult. Um, what about Melville? Melville's the great American novelist, man. He is the best thing we've ever produced. I think that's probably the answer. I think I have read some Peter Hacker before. Can you say some titles here? Yeah, that would help me a little bit. Do you think it's possible to approach philosophy as a hobby? I mean, let's use the word avocation, right? An avocation is like the thing that's not the thing you do to make a living, but it's like something that's a substantial side interest of yours. I think philosophy is totally like this. There's this great book by Jonathan Rose called The Intellectual Life of the British Working Class, and it details how working people for hundreds of years in the UK were involved in self-education, including reading philosophy on their own. And I think it's just proof that anyone can do it. Yeah, it's great. Say you love your videos and that you learn a lot and you're inspired to read great books. Hey, thank you very much, folks. I really appreciate that. What are my thoughts on David Foster Wallace? And if so, what is your opinion on his works? Aside from the fact that apparently I'm just doing my best to look um, like David Foster Wallace, at least that's what commenters keep telling me. I love David Foster Wallace. David Foster Wallace is great. We all started pretending like he wasn't great at some point because people got annoying about it. But David Foster Wallace is great. I met someone yesterday who studied or 2 days ago who studied with David Foster Wallace when he was teaching at Pomona College, and I was so jealous. Like I tried my best not to show it. Um, and she made this comment. She was like, "Oh, it was nice for me because I wasn't a big David Foster Wallace fan, and there were guys in the class who were clearly David Foster Wallace fans and it was his fiction writing workshops at Pomona, and they would like use footnotes and stuff because they were trying to be David Foster Wallace, and I almost felt secondhand embarrassment because I know if I were in David Foster Wallace's fiction writing class, I would totally have been doing that too. My favorite dialogue with Plato is maybe Meno. I like the Meno's paradox stuff quite a bit. Though I've been doing this uh close read of the Republic and I'm getting a lot out of it. So yeah. If I ever meet you in person, Raheem, and you have your baby with you, I'll sign your baby. Yeah, sure. Um, Nabokov is great. I do think that's the right thing to do. I think, or I think he's great. I'm a big fan of Carefree Wandering. I have watched a little bit of Carefree Wandering before, and I do think I want to watch more. I don't think I've done this authenticity stuff. I don't think I've watched that before. You know, there's this great book by Charles Taylor, that's called The Ethics of Authenticity. And I've been wanting to make something about authenticity and about how um, the value of authenticity is, I think, substantially changed over the last like 50 years, but also because of AI and stuff. It feels a little lame or tacky to be like, oh, because of AI, but AI is actually playing a big role in questions about authenticity. I would love to write some more or maybe do some videos about authenticity in the future. Um, but I haven't watched the Carefree Wandering stuff that's particularly about this. Um, Someone here saying that they've loved the Republic read along. Thank you very much. For those who don't know, like I have this newsletter. I always link it under my videos. I don't think it's linked currently, but I'll link it when this goes, when this is archived or whatever. Where I do chapter by chapter read throughs of works of philosophy, and we've been doing the Republic. We're at like book 7 or 8, and so I've learned a lot by doing that slowly. And I hope other people are learning a lot as well. I'm doing my best. I always feel like I want to do more for those. I want to always give more, but I'm writing about 2,000 words per chapter these days, so I think that's doing all right. This is a bunch of people asked me about Simone Weil. I like Simone Weil. I talked about it earlier in the chat, so I won't say too much. You could go back and look if you wanted to, but I like The Need for Roots a lot. That's probably my favorite Simone Weil book. If you want to know about Nietzsche, I say The Gay Science because I liked it so much, but I would probably read The Genealogy of Morals first if you're only going to read one. Yeah. What books do you recommend for mathematical and semantic logic? I'm looking into philosophy of mathematics graduate programs. Well, if you want to know semantics, then you need to do the Hyman Kratzer book. Um, for mathematical logic, it depends on exactly um, what you mean. Like, do you just need to like learn like the set theory stuff and like learn about completeness and compactness, and then eventually go on to like Gödel's and completeness theorem? Because those you're just better off just finding any kind of like a well-sourced textbook, and I don't know what the current recommendations are for that. For All X from the University of Calgary, he's the guy. Richard Zock is not the first one to do that, but For All X is a pretty good book. That's an open source logic textbook. So, um, um, can I recommend any philosophers on the lines of Byung-Chul Han? Well, that's a really good question to put this together. Joseph Pieper is someone who is actually very reminiscent to Byung-Chul Han. Obviously, Heidegger and Hannah Arendt actually have a lot in common with him as well. But I'm not sure, you know, to put here. Is this my job? YouTube and Substack together are my full-time job. Yeah. How did I, okay, so question here is how did I lose all that weight? Um, the answer, it turns out, is you eat less, and for me it was that you drink a lot less. I also think that part of it was that I was so depressed working my corporate jobs that I was doing a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. And once I got laid off, I actually discovered I was much happier, and that helped. That helped quite a bit. Um, the hollow, I'm sorry, aphantasia, is that the inability to form images, or can you say it a little bit more? Um, Here, I want to make sure I understand. Um, yeah. I'm not familiar with these movies, but I would also say if I was going to do things on like the philosophy of something like that, that would might be a thing I could stream about in the future rather than make a full video about it. So, um, you know, Thoughts on Hemingway? I haven't read Hemingway since I was in high school, but I liked him at one point quite a bit. Oh, I like a lot of idealists. Berkeley is like probably my least favorite idealist. If I like idealism, I'm thinking much more of the German transcendental variety. Yeah, am I familiar with the idea of scientism, the view that science is the only valid form of knowledge, and some of the thoughtful critiques that have been made of it? I would say I think the critiques that I've read have all kind of made sense. Scientism is oddly popular, um, and yet no philosopher actually defends the view that I know of. Am I familiar with Lewis Gordon? Lewis Gordon's at UConn. Lewis Gordon was at UConn when I was there, but I sat in on one Gordon class for 1 or 2 weeks before I had to drop it for other reasons. But he's a good guy, and I have not done a ton of Africana philosophy. It was one of the reasons I was trying to sit in on his class, but I wasn't able to do it for time reasons. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Have I ever heard about the Katherine Project? Thoughts? Yeah, I love the Katherine Project. I participate in the Katherine Project. The Katherine Project is great. Anybody who doesn't know about the Katherine Project, I'll say it again. They run reading groups that are totally free through great books. Anybody above the age of 16 can apply. They meet online, so even if you're international, you can join. They are a fantastic they're a fantastic way for you to learn how to read better, read in a group, participate in great group discussions, and just expand like the things that you actually read. So join the Catherine Project if you can and support them. They are great. My view on Dostoevsky's work, Lonely K, is that they're all great. They all are really, really great. And I would Crime and Punishment's like my favorite novel, right? And I love Brothers Karamazov. And I'm reading some more Dostoevsky later this year for a few reasons. Hey, thank you so much, Adam, about the read through the human condition. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Um, just working through it slowly, working through it together, I think is yeah, that's the key. Is math more important to become a better thinker than philosopher? Plato seemed to think so, and I think he was at least partly onto something. Learning to think mathematically or to think logically is going to help you a ton. So it's one, yeah. Lord of the Rings. Um, I chose UConn for grad school primarily because it had professors that I was interested in working with. That's why I applied to them in the first place. I was interested in weird logics. I was interested in philosophy of language. So, yeah. Um, cool. I mean, unfortunately, stuff about like grad school advice is often really boring because it comes down to I was interested in their research and I thought perhaps um, they would want to work with me, and a few of them finally said yes. I was very happy with where I chose to go to grad school. I did not regret it in the slightest. Um, hmm. Let's see. Any final questions? We've been going for like an hour and 15 minutes. I'll probably want to go fairly soon because I've got to go write and do some more work. But if there's any other readings here, um, yeah, I've read John Chrysostom on the priesthood. Do I recommend reading more than one book at once? I always am reading more than one book at once. I'm often reading like 6 or 7 books at once. So yeah, um, and it's probably like the number one thing that helps me read more books is that I'm often flipping through a few books. Like I'm reading right now A History of Reading by Alberto Manguel. I need to finish that up. Ian M. Banks's one of his culture novels, a book about Nietzsche, um, the Republic. So I'm reading like 4 books right now. Oh, and then Roberto Bolaño. So I don't know. It's just how often do I DNF? If a book doesn't grab me, especially a fiction work in 10 pages, I DNF all the time. Um, how should I decide if I want to pursue a bachelor's degree in philosophy? Just ask yourself, like, is this something that you dig? Like, is it something that you could see yourself really reading for um, a couple of years, basically? Don't get into it because you think you'll sound smart. That's what originally drove me there, and it turns out it doesn't work. I very rarely sound smart. So, yeah. Do I think that the advancements in science have helped support Spinoza's philosophy? That is a very interesting question that I have no way how to I have no way how to like I have no idea how to answer that question. Um, I only almost always just take notes on nonfiction. I only annotate if I know I'm going to write something about the stuff. But I do okay occasionally underline if I think a line is particularly beautiful or really good. You know, that's the big thing. Um, yeah. All right, folks. It's been an hour and 15 minutes. Maybe next time I'll have some stuff that I would actually want to like I'll have some topics or I'll have someone join me for the live stream. I'm gonna try to do this a little bit more often. If you dug it, let me know. Maybe just like the stream or leave a comment or something. I really appreciate it. All right, folks. Take care.